This is Golden Black Live. Brian back with us. I'm Kyle. You can read the screen, hopefully. Hopefully you're just listening and not actually watching us. Not sure why you
don't want people to watch us, huh?
Not sure why you stare at us too, other than to check out the sponsors and visit them, of course.
Placard.
Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow is a big day. That's a TV.
It looks it's a TV portraying a placard.
Stay at HGI tonight. State Farm agent Trent Johnson. Visit Trent on the web at trentismyagent.com. Triple X Family Restaurants on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. And Basham Rentals already leasing for the fall of 2015. Visit BashamRentals.com. You can tell I'm not as good at this as Alan. He has all those right up here. I have to cheat. All right, so basketball at Penn State tomorrow. Brian Stacy is on the way that direction to cover that game. Purdue 10-7, 2-2 in the league. There's two ways to look at 2-2 in my opinion. You feel like you should be 3-1 because you had a 2-0 start, a couple of ranked teams that you wanted to split against. The other way to look at it is you're 2-2 and you've played four pretty good teams, I think, in the Big Ten. Which way do you look at it?
I look at it like Purdue just kind of missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
Purdue has kind of plateaued in Big Ten play, but they did it against two borderline top 10 opponents. There's good to that and there's bad to that. One, well, I guess there isn't any good to it, but there's acceptability in it in the sense that you lost two very good teams, so it's not like you just went out and lost to Penn State Northwestern.
No loss
But
is acceptable.
The other part of it is that you're now done for the balance of the regular season with Maryland and with Wisconsin, the two teams that I would have to think will be ranked for the balance of the regular season. So Purdue's opportunities for quality wins here is kind of a moving target. You don't know how many they're going to have. And I don't think Purdue's in a position right now where the NCAA tournament is something that, is a front burner issue we should be talking about. Obviously, it's the aspiration. But to get into that conversation, Purdue is going to have to beat good people.
Yeah.
And with those two teams off the schedule now for the remainder of the season, that puts Purdue in a little bit of a tough spot in terms of being able to play its way into where it wants to be.
I think you got to beat somebody or two people maybe down the stretch, and you probably can't have another black mark on the resume.
Well,
maybe not more than one, but you've had a couple of losses at home that you probably shouldn't have had, and you probably shouldn't lose. Shouldn't lose at Penn State.
Yeah, that's why Purdue needs quality wins, is because they have bad losses. Purdue needs volume of wins. They obviously need to get up around 20 going into the Big Ten tournament, I would have to think, to be in that conversation. But they also need wins that are going to cancel out the North Florida loss and the Gardner-Webb loss. And what I just said about Wisconsin and Maryland being off the schedule, those would be wins that would go a long way in taking off some of the sting of those losses in terms of resume. But as I said, right now Purdue's not in a situation where they should be considered an NCAA tournament team. That's what they want to do. That's what fans want them to do, obviously. But I think right now they have to win a bunch of games before that becomes a reasonable conversation.
Why is Purdue's offense not playing as well as it was early in the season?
Well, it's not making shots. I think when Purdue doesn't make three-pointers, I think it allows opponents to really tee off on the post. And a lot of the times this season when Purdue's really functioned well offensively, its jump shooting has been pretty good. And it's kind of opened things up for everybody else. When Kendall Stevens isn't making shots, there's a direct link between Kendall Stevens making shots and Purdue functioning well offensively.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. But it isn't just about Kendall Stevens. Vince Edwards was up in the 40s for the longest time, and he's now down in the 30s. Dakota Mathias is shooting 35%. I think he's capable of better. I think in time you'll see him shoot a little bit better, but Purdue just needs to make jump shots. Because right now they're emphasizing the post. They're getting A.J. Hammonds and Isaac Haas a lot of touches, but they're not being efficient with it. They're not shooting as high a percentage around the rim as you ideally would like. A.J. Hammonds turns the ball over too much, which has been a long-standing issue for him, and Isaac Haas doesn't make his free throws. So you're putting an enormous emphasis into a phase of the game that you're not getting an equivalent payout towards.
Yeah.
So you have to make up the difference somewhere else. And that somewhere else probably lies in jump shooting and generating easy baskets for yourself. And right now the jump shooting isn't quite clicking. When it does, life gets easier for Hammonds and Haas. Maybe they're a little bit more efficient and things function a little bit better than they have been.
It's easier to coach when guys are hitting shots too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing how those
It's-
things
yeah,
go
yeah.
hand in hand.
Matt Painter's job gets a lot easier when the ball's going to the basket.
Defensively, you wrote a story earlier in the week on goldenblack.com that Purdue's playing better defensively. They're also fouling.
Yeah, so
A
it
heck
kind of
of a
goes hand in hand. Yeah,
heck of a
it's like,
lot.
well, they're playing better defense, but they're still not preventing opponents from scoring.
Yeah.
So, what are they doing? But when you look at the fouls, so many of the fouls are offensive fouls on the centers. So many of the fouls are just cheap fouls on defensive rebounds. So it's not like all these fouls that sent Wisconsin and Maryland constantly to the foul line have been defensive fouls where you got beat off the dribble or you got exposed in a one-on-one situation and it was a breakdown of your defense.
Yeah.
In total, it's probably just general sloppiness all around the court for Purdue in terms of those fouls that have really held it back. Because if Purdue had just kept Wisconsin a little bit off the foul line, that would have been a closer game at the end. Perhaps Purdue makes one more play and it's an entirely different final sequence. Maybe not an outcome, but a final sequence against Maryland. If they had just kept them off the foul line, Purdue might have won that game.
They've sort of abandoned the zone at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't work.
It didn't work. It's the same thing as with man. It's the same thing I said all last year when people were freaking out about why don't they play zone. Well, what reason do you have to believe that they'd be better at zone than they are at man-to-man? They're not. Ideally, I think if they could have been functional in zone, which I don't think they've been completely dysfunctional. They've allowed too many open threes, which is kind of...
And the baseline. Allow too much on the baseline.
Yeah. They're not good at playing zone. But I think had they just been functional with it, it could have just been something you go to for 5, 6, 7, 8 possessions a game just to do something different. You know, when foul trouble takes hold, maybe you run a possession here or there. You know, perhaps when you have a certain matchup where a team's not very good at shooting from the corners, perhaps you can go to it. But when you look at all the reasons they implemented the zone, they're all kind of coming to bear. Not surprisingly, because Painter saw these things coming, and that's why he did it in the first place. One is, you know, you aren't very good defending the dribble.
Wait, I thought he did it because people suggested on message
Yeah,
boards.
no. The reasons where you have a little bit of a deficiency of quickness on the wing, you know, you got to keep people off the dribble, you got to protect your big men from foul trouble, and you got to stay out of foul trouble in general. And all that stuff is kind of coming to bear now. You know,
Yeah.
dribble penetration, whatnot, foul trouble for the big men, and just in general. So all the reasons Purdue wanted to play zone are kind of rearing their ugly heads right now, and Purdue doesn't have the zone to go to because it just hasn't worked.
Are the officials going to figure out how to handle Isaac Haas and sort of call the game?
That's a good question, because is it reasonable? You know, Isaac Haas per 40 minutes averages like 8.5 fouls drawn per
Yeah.
game. Is it reasonable? In reality, I'm not saying how it should be, I'm saying how it is. Is it reasonable to expect Isaac Haas to draw 20 fouls per game, which is probably about the amount of times, realistically speaking, he does get fouled? I don't know. But you know, as Matt Painter says, a lot of it's on him too. He
Yeah.
does have to be a little more careful, you know, throwing that weight around. You know, that's not fair. That he has to, you know, his greatest advantage in some ways becomes a disadvantage just because of his unprecedented size and the impact it has on the people he impacts. But that might just be it. He just needs to learn, possibly, to play a little more gently, for lack of a better term. Or else this is going to be an ongoing
I
problem.
mean, his elbows are at people's head height. That's just
Yeah.
the way it is.
Right, but when they're out
mean,
like this,
Yeah.
then he's setting himself up for.
the way the rules are now, which
failure.
I think the rules, the automatic flagrant one is a
Yeah,
little
it's
ridiculous.
flawed. It's very
I think
flawed.
it's very flawed. But
It doesn't take into account intent.
Yeah, but it's the rule right now.
Yes.
So he has to adjust.
Yes.
Which is hard to do. I mean, if you've played,
Yeah.
and he's played high school where his elbows were higher than kids' heads,
Well,
so he didn't
that's-
have to. He
that's
didn't
the
have to
thing for
worry
him,
about
Is
it.
in high school, those elbows went
Went
right over the
straight
guy's
up.
head. Now they go right into their jaw.
Yeah,
So
it is an adjustment.
everything's relative, I guess.
Yeah. This one is sort of out of left field. Do you get a sense with AJ Hammonds what his plan is after this year?
No. I mean, you know, he's the same inconsistent player he's been from day one. So is a zebra ever going to change its stripes? We don't know. But right now, he's not playing at an early entry level. Now, the most important thing is how he's playing at the end of the year when he's fresh in people's minds and when he can show people he's trending upward. As of right now, I don't think he's playing like an early entry guy. A lot of guys don't play like early entry guys, then they're early entries. So much goes into these decisions, and at some point in time, you probably recalibrate your expectation, what you're willing to accept, so on and so forth. But Purdue needs him to be better, and for his stock from here on out, for higher levels of basketball after this one, he needs to play a lot better, be a lot more consistent.
Yeah.
He's shown flashes, but that's what he's done from day one. You've seen that game from him where he's really good. You've seen that possession from him where he's really good. Then he turns the ball over, he fouls too much, and sometimes he just doesn't seem to be as engaged as he should be. Now,
Yeah.
he's a complicated young man. We've talked about this at length. And that doesn't mean he's a bad person. It doesn't mean he's a bad player. He just has certain complexities to him that you don't deal with a lot of players. And he just has to grasp consistency for Purdue's sake and for his sake. And if it hasn't happened yet, you have to start to wonder if it ever is going to happen.
Bryson Scott hasn't played a whole lot in the last 3 games, is it? 14 seconds?
He played 14 seconds against Maryland.
What do you think his role will be going forward? Does it depend on him?
I think he could just as soon, yes, it depends on him, I think he could just as soon snap right out of this starting tomorrow at Penn State after this week of consecutive practices. I don't know how he conducted himself in practice this week. I don't know how he was conducting himself before. But the other day on his call-in, Matt Painter was talking about defense. And he talked about how attention to detail has really helped him with the improvement on defense we've talked about. Mm-hmm. And one thing he said was when I started subbing less, our attention to detail went up. And I was drawing too much into that.
Yeah.
But I thought that I kind of put 2 and 2 together there and thought maybe that has something to do with why Bryson Scott.
You took out your jump to conclusions, Matt.
Yeah, because he doesn't have. Bryson Scott has all the physical tools to be a good defensive player, a really good defensive player, actually. And when he stopped playing, Purdue's defense on the ball got a little bit better. So maybe there's a link there. Perhaps there was something he could have done in these consecutive practices the last 5 days that would convince Painter that he's onto it. Perhaps he got the message by not playing and really refocused himself this week, because Purdue really needs him, to be dialed in. He really needs to be dialed in, or else there's a very good chance this doesn't end well.
I think he's a valuable player for Purdue.
He absolutely is.
He does
Yeah,
some things that
you're
nobody else
absolutely
can do out there.
Yeah. He's one of a kind on this roster
Yeah.
in terms of his speed in the open floor, his ability to get to the basket when there are opportunities, and his ability to be a very aggressive man-to-man defender. The thing with Bryson Scott is he's always been a certain type of player, and Purdue's asking him to be kind of a different type of player, but still use the same things that made him the type of player he was before. The thing for him is simply decision-making. When he makes the right decision, whether it be to attack the basket, whether to look for his shot, whether it be make a pass, whether it be push in transition, whether to go for a steal, whatever, when he makes the right decision, he's pretty good. He just doesn't always make the right decision. What Purdue needs to do, I don't think he's ever going to change, because, as I said before, a zebra doesn't change its stripes overnight. But right now, let's say you have a 4-to-1 good play to bad play ratio. If Purdue can get him to 8-to-1, 10-to-1, all of a sudden you're sitting here looking at a player who can really help this team.
Yeah. So a big week ahead, in my opinion. Penn State, and then is it Illinois on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Then Illinois on Wednesday. So a week from now, we will be talking about what in regards to Purdue men's basketball?
I think the Illinois game is a really big one. Purdue's got, you really want to see Purdue beat Penn State. Obviously, Penn State's not very good. The way Penn State operates, you got to stop DJ Newbill. Purdue did a really nice job just now stopping Melo Trimble, although they couldn't keep him off the foul line. I think if Purdue plays defense the way it did against Maryland, I think they'll have a real good chance to stop DJ Newbill and beat Penn State. Then the Illinois game's a really big one, because that's a opponent you can easily lose to. Not that you can't easily lose to Penn State, because better teams than this one have gone to Penn State and lost, better Purdue teams.
Yeah.
But I think Illinois is a real toss-up game. Purdue's played well in Champaign, but with very different teams. They're a little bit shorthanded without Ray Rice, but that didn't stop them from beating Maryland in Champaign. I think that's a really big game. And then going forward, you get 2 more home games against Iowa and Indiana, 2 very beatable opponents, and then that trip to Northwestern. You should beat Northwestern. So you're looking at a 5-game swing here. If you can go 4-1, I think the whole complexion of your season changes.
Yeah. We were going to fight about something. You got anything you want to throw out there? We didn't really fight.
I can't really think of anything. I'm just glad, if we do fight, I'm glad it's you and not Tony, because I'm not doing that one.
Yeah, he was a pretty good wrestler in his day there in
Yeah.
Iowa. I would imagine he still has some moves.
Wrestlers are feisty, too.
Yeah. All right, on that note, that's going to do it for us. Thanks to our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn. When tomorrow is a big day, stay at HGI tonight. State Farm agent Trent Johnson. Visit Trent on the web at trentismyagent.com. Triple X Family Restaurants on the hill but on the level. A Purdue tradition since 1929. I almost have these memorized. And Basham Rentals, already leasing for the fall. Visit BashamRentals.com. That'll do it for this week. Alan will be back. I know, boo. I know, I agree. We'll be back next week.
Hey, now. No,
What?
he does a great job.
There you go. He does a terrible job. No. All right, that's our fight. So he'll be back next week at 2 o'clock Friday. Right here, you can watch the replay of this show. What does Al say? Around dinner time?
Well, I always say around dinner time, but it seems to me like they're getting up before then. So
Pre-dinner?
we might want to revisit that issue.
Happy hour, maybe? I don't know. I don't know when happy hour is.
Brunch. No, that's early.
So that's it. I think we're done. I think we're done here. Thank you, Brian. Thanks to Tony Ursuline, the wrestling coach who came in.
Way to stick the landing there, big guy.
and everybody else in the back. Okay, that'll do it for us. Be back next week. Thanks for watching. This is Golden Black Live.